Okay, so my first question is, could you please state your name and career?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Chloe. I am a biochemistry and molecular biology PhD student at the University of Miami.
So what did you do in high school in regards to activities, classes, and sports?
Quite surprisingly, I actually did not do many science or STEM extracurriculars in high school. I went to, we called it a classical high school. So we focused on, say, like Latin and literature and rhetoric, history. So it was a very humanities focused high school. And as part of that, I got involved in activities like mock trial and debate. I also did quite a few sports. I did track and field and I did soccer. So probably not what people would expect for someone that's now doing a PhD in science.
Mm-hmm. So when did you know that you wanted to go into the field of science and do research?
That's a good question. So, like I said, when at humanities high school, I actually thought maybe I was going to go into law or business. And my senior year of high school, our school required us to do like a senior capstone project. And you had two options for this. Either you do your own research, like on a computer, and then write about a topic, or our science teacher offered us, you can go volunteer in a University of Minnesota laboratory that he had connections with and write about your research experience there. I just thought that sounded like a really awesome opportunity. And both my parents are scientists, so I was like, oh, maybe it'd be fun to try it out. And I got hooked right away when I first stepped into that laboratory. I didn't do that much because obviously I was still in high school at the time. It was a lot of shadowing and making solutions and learning how a laboratory operates. But realizing that science is a lot more than just reading out of a textbook, right? Like how we learn it in class and taking those multiple choice exams. But it's really about the whole research process of trying to understand the unknown. That's what really excited me. And as soon as I finished that experience up, I knew going into college, I needed to find another lab experience. And from there, it's just been trying to find one lab after another and stay in research.
Mm-hmm. So what did you major in when you were in college?
I majored in molecular biology and legal studies. So again, the legal studies kind of harkens back to my interest in law, but I wanted to also do science. Molecular biology was a very good fit. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they have a huge range of science majors. I want to say over 50 different science majors you can pick from, which was a little overwhelming, and it was hard figuring out which one of all those I wanted to do. I started in biochemistry. I ended up switching to molecular biology, but they're quite similar in the classes. I think there were only like 2 or 3 classes differences, one of which is I didn't have to take Calc 2 for if I did molecular biology, and I was all for that. But molecular biology also allowed me to do a few more fun electives with graduate school classes that I wanted to take.
Mm-hmm. So what kinds of extracurricular activities did you participate in when you were in college? Did you also conduct different types of research when you were in college?
Yes, so this is really when my extracurriculars took a very big shift. Instead of being involved in mock trial and track and field, I switched into doing research nonstop. I was in quite a few labs. I want to say 4 or 5 labs throughout my undergrad time. So just really trying to find as much time as I could do research as possible. And I also got involved in a lot of science outreach in undergrad, which has become a passion project of mine going into graduate school. There's a really cool department at University of Wisconsin-Madison called WisScience, which really focuses on making STEM education more accessible for everybody. So I did quite a few different volunteer opportunities and ended up being paid opportunities through this department. Say partnering with different schools, teach them about science, working with incoming first-year college students to help them with the process of starting science in a massive university that is Wisconsin-Madison. And I also worked at the library for their science section, which was called the BioCommons. We held a lot of science events there, and it was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. And I think that's also helped me now going into graduate school, starting this whole science Instagram page and meeting a lot more incoming scientists, like hopefully yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was also wondering what kinds of research you did when you were undergrad, and when you are undergrad doing research, like what kinds of work do you do?
So that's a tough question because, like I said, I did quite a few different labs and they spanned really a lot of different fields. And I did that on purpose to a certain extent because I came in thinking that I was going to find exactly the right type of science I wanted to do. And that was it for the rest of my life. But every time I was trying a new research project, I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. So the first lab I started in high school was actually cancer biology. And that's what I'm doing now in graduate school. But then I moved to undergrad. I was like, I want to try something else. So I worked first for the Wisconsin National Primate Center for a little bit. And that spanned a whole bunch of different projects, all to do with monkeys. And then I didn't really like working with monkeys that much, if I'm completely honest. So I switched over to a heart arrhythmia lab that was in the Department of Medicine. And we worked a lot more then. We worked with mouse samples, we worked with different cell lines. So I did a lot of genotyping, a lot of bench work, which is what I realized is what I really love to do. After that, I worked for a bacteriology lab for a bit. So big game change there, working with bacteria instead of cells and mice. And then I did an internship in a biotechnology company in Japan after that for 6 months. That was amazing. I really loved doing that. And it was interesting to see the differences between academic research and industrial research. After that, I came back and I worked for a cell biology lab and I completed my senior thesis there. Again, this came back to a lot more cell work. They actually worked with frog oocytes. They're actually really big cells that you can see. You work with them actually under a microscope and you inject different things into them. They're really awesome. But after all these experiences, I realized that there wasn't one type of science I was like, sign me up for the rest of my life. All of it was really interesting. But when I was applying to graduate school, something that stuck out to me the most, that I think I enjoyed the most at the time, is cancer research. So now I'm working with Dr. Stefan Lee at the University of Miami here, and we do cancer research here. It's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. So what did the process to get into a PhD program look like?
I first started thinking about it all and preparing everything my senior year of college. So I wanted to start the following year right into my PhD program. So you probably have to start thinking about a year ahead of time, I'd say. And I made like a full Excel sheet of all the schools at first that I could remotely be interested in. And then from there, I started narrowing it down on the factors. I mean, these factors really depend on who you are. They can change. I wanted a bigger city. I've been in Wisconsin, particularly Madison, Wisconsin, for 4 years. And it's a nice city, but it's quite small. And I just wanted something a little bigger, I guess. I also wanted to make sure that I really enjoyed the research. So I made sure that all the universities I was interested in, I spent some time looking at the websites to make sure there were at least a couple of professors whose research I would have really wanted to do. Another thing that was really important to me is the graduate student experience. So I made sure to talk to some graduate students before I applied, because some universities, they may look really good on paper, but then you find out that the graduate students aren't exactly happy there. And so I wanted to make sure I had a good balance. Like I enjoy research and I wanted to make sure I was doing it all the time, but I also wanted to make sure I was happy while I was still there doing research. So after I made that whole list, it was, I think about December is when the deadline is to apply. Then you have to start asking for letters of recommendation, start drafting a personal statement. I started doing that all really the fall semester. So September to December was go, go, go. I had everyone read it over and you send it off. And then you slowly start hearing from December to, I think it's February, whether or not you get accepted to schools. Some of them will do interviews, they'll fly you out, keep you there. And then you find out whether or not you're officially accepted after that. So between March and May is when you'll find out what programs you get accepted into.
Mm-hmm. So how long are PhD programs and what do they exactly entail and how do they differ from like undergrad experiences?
All right, I'll break this up a little bit. So first it was, how long is a PhD? This depends a lot between the field you're in, the department, even the specific professors. On average for biomedical science PhDs, I've heard between 5.5 to 6 years. This all being said, it can change a lot. My laboratory specifically, we tend to get our graduate students out a little sooner, maybe about 4 years. But also I have friends in other labs that their average is 7 or 8 years. So it can vary a lot. Again, this is something that you make sure to talk to the graduate students in the lab about, and the PI, the principal investigator, about, to make sure you guys are on the same page about how long you want to be there for. Typically shorter PhDs are if you want to go into industry, while longer PhDs are if you're planning on staying into academia, because you just want to publish more and have more research under your belt. I can't remember the second half of your question there, if you don't mind repeating it.
Yeah, so I was wondering what PhD programs entail and how they differ from undergrad level studies.
So PhD programs, typically what's the biggest difference between them and undergrad is you're doing research as your full-time job. You are getting paid for it, but you also are getting credits for it. So it's a little bit of a weird in between. But your classes really do take a back burner. You're taking a couple here and there, but I've pretty much finished all of my classes, and I'm coming into my third year here. While undergrad completely flipped, your research is your back burner. That's the thing, the extracurriculars, what you're doing for fun. And the classes are what you need to do to get good grades, and go on to the next big thing after college. So I'd say that's the biggest difference there. And for a PhD, what it really entails is getting the research done. Beyond that, you've got to be reading the papers, so you make sure what's going on and what research you're doing fits into the bigger picture of it all. A lot of graduate students also do teaching on the side. Some schools require it. You're also training in a lot of incoming either master's students, other undergrads, incoming PhD students. And that's something I've had to take on. Once you become a senior graduate student, it's your role to be training in the incoming students. And yeah, I think that covers it. Really, research. That's the big thing that you do in a PhD.
So what does an average day look like for you as a PhD student and researcher in biochemistry and molecular biology?
These differ a lot depending on what experiments I've got going for the day, because some days I'll have really long time courses, like 8, 12 hours. And other days, I might only have 2 or 3 hours worth of experiments. But typically what happens is I come in the morning, say like 8 a.m. or so. I'll sit down. If I need to put some cells into a time course of some sort or another, a lot of my experiments involve heat shocking cells, which means I take them from the normal incubator they're in and put them in one that's 6 degrees higher temperature. And if I need to do something like that, I'll do that first thing in the morning. Then I come and sit down at my desk and I plan out my day. Writing in your notebook is a huge part of being in any laboratory, so you can have a record of what you're doing. So I always start my day by planning all of that out, and then I have that notebook with me throughout the day. So if there's any modifications or any problems with experiments, you make sure to write that down in your notebook so you've got the full record there. I plan out my day, check my emails. That sometime normally in the morning-ish is when I'm doing lab ordering a bit, and I'm training in other students, and in the afternoon take those cells out of whatever treatment they're in, and that's really when I go to town on experiments, and the rest of the day is all experiments. A couple times in there might be a few meetings. My boss comes in a few times a week, and so you have to schedule some time to sit down and chat with him. But it's nice. It's pretty flexible what you get to do with each day.
So as a PhD student, do you aspire to become a professor and go into like the world of academia and publish like your own like research, or do you want to do more of like work for like different companies and go in more in that industry field?
It's a great question, and one I unfortunately don't have an answer to yet. I do need to start thinking about it because I am in my third year at this point. I've been attending a lot of seminars and workshops, trying to network a bit more to learn about the different, what path I might want to take. Because of course there's academia on one end, so I need to do a postdoc afterwards and then apply to become a professor. The other track that you mentioned, the big one, is going into industry as a scientist. Sometimes you do need to do a postdoc for that still, which is pretty much you work in a lab still, but you've already got your PhD for it. But there's also what I'm learning, tons of other tracks in between that aren't just academic, become a professor, industry, scientist. Something I've been interested in lately is public policy, which would really marry in my interests of both the legal law side and the science side. Public policy, it can span a lot of different things. The public policy I'd be interested in is STEM education, how STEM is taught in schools. I think that's something that needs to be addressed a lot better on a whole school-wide and not college-wide, but I'm losing the name, the United States, countrywide scale of everything. Because I feel like I got a good science education, but I think some people didn't. Some people get great science educations, and I'd love for everyone to have equal opportunity to learn and enjoy science.
So what do you love most about being a PhD student and researcher?
I really think it just comes down to I love research. I love the research process. And I think you need that love of doing science in order to get through the highs and the lows of doing a PhD, because experiments won't work. You'll think that you're not meant to be in the PhD program, you're not cut out for it, you're not smart enough. But at the end of the day, if you love what you do, you're going to keep doing it, right? And I think that's the big thing for me. I love the research process. Yeah.
So I was also wondering, when you're a PhD student, how do you pick what kinds of research you're conducting?
Most of the time, that's up to the professor of the lab you're joining. There's definitely some wiggle room there. And so when you're applying for programs, you talk to professors that you're interested in working with. You discuss potential research projects with them. Some of them will be, this is the project I've got. Whoever wants to join me, this is the project you'll be doing. This is bam, bam, bam. And that's the kind of lab I joined, which was pretty great. He had a few different projects. And so I worked on multiple projects when I started. It was just like, whichever one takes off, that's the one you're going with. Other labs though, like I do have a friend in another lab that is way more, this is my general field of the professor that they work in, say it's breast cancer research, but I want you to find something cool to work on from there. So for them, it was a lot more, you have to dive into the literature your first year to see if you can find anything new, novel, and exciting to start on. So.
Okay, one last final question. Do you have a final piece of advice for aspiring scientists?
The biggest thing really is just go for it and don't give up. If it's what you want to do, nothing should stand in your way. I know that sounds very general and vague, but there's so many, all the scientists I've talked to, they've had at least one moment in their life where they're saying, I wanted to give up. I thought that was it. I thought I'd be done with. But instead of giving up, they pushed on. They kept going. They didn't care whether or not that little voice in the back of their head was saying, you can't do it. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. I definitely have had a few of those points in my life. Say when I was an undergrad, I never was the type of person who got straight A's in all my classes. I loved the research of it. I didn't like as much of the reading out of the textbook, right? And organic chemistry, I remember I struggled so much in that class. And the first test I ever took on it, I did terribly. And I remember calling up my parents saying, I can't do it anymore. And they were very supportive, understanding. They're like, just sleep on it, you do whatever you need. And I remember the next day waking up and thinking, okay, I did really badly, but I can only try the hardest and best that I can, right? And even if I do end up failing this class, I want to be proud of the fact that I put the best effort I could into it. So I made sure after that I found study groups to go to. I went to all the office hours with the professor, with this TAs, and I ended up doing really well in the class. Actually, I ended up getting a B, which was amazing. I wasn't expecting that after how hard I was struggling in the beginning. But I think every scientist has that kind of story, and you just got to really keep going for it.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And same to you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
All right.